Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David, Dan, and Hoges give their predictions for the 2023 Minnesota Twins season. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me as always is Dan Thompson and special third chair guest in studio, Andrew Hoges Hoganson. Boys, are you as excited as I am? Spring training is done. The World Baseball Classic is done. We're finally going to see baseball games that matter.
See, I don't know how you can trash the World Baseball Classic just so quickly, just so flippantly, when you have all these players saying that the intensity matched the World Series. And I mean, I don't know if you watched some of those games between the Dominican and Puerto Rico. I mean, those were awesome. The Shohei Ohtani versus Mike Trout, those games mattered to those boys, David.
How many World Series games has Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout played in? Can we count those on one hand? Or how many do we need?
Hey, they got to get their moment somehow. I think that's why it was so meaningful. But I loved the World Baseball Classic. I thought it was a really nice preview to the regular season, and man, it got me so excited for this to start.
A couple of notes that I'll say in favor of the World Baseball Classic. It's fun to have baseball games that actually, they do matter. I'm not saying they don't matter at all, but we've had this discussion a little bit. I would much rather obviously watch the Twins win a World Series than Team USA win the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, but I don't think that makes it any less special. Like, of course I'd rather have the Twins win the World Series than the USA win. I mean, that's the team that I root for every single day for 162 games. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy that too. It's like the Olympics. Like I love watching the USA win in track and field, but I'd rather have the Packers win a Super Bowl. Like it's like you're comparing apples to.
But I think just the fact that it's the de facto, like you're cheering for the U.S. To me, it's just like, well, of course everybody's going to cheer for the U.S.
Yeah, but you cheer for the Twins because you're from Minnesota. Like, what's the difference? Like,
it's a smaller fan base, and the team, the talent, and the way the season progresses is just far more intricate than the World Baseball Classic can ever be.
You talk about me making up arguments as I go along here. Now you're inventing ones about you can't cheer for the U.S. just because you live there. However, I live in Minneapolis, 2 miles away from Target Field, so I root for the Twins, but that has nothing to fit.
Well, no, okay. No, you're twisting my words a little bit here, but so I will say a couple of things in favor of the Baseball Classic also. It is fun to see which players are from which country, and like now I'll know, like, oh, this player's from here and this player's from here, where previously, but I wouldn't retain it like I will now. Like seeing the guys on Puerto Rico and seeing the guys from Venezuela play, oh, that's where they're from.
I think it was really cool this year how they did it with regions. Like they had pool play games and more closer to where those home countries are. It was just really awesome to see all of those fans come out that I didn't know that there was that many of them that cared so much about baseball, and it was cool seeing how much the world kind of embraced it this year. And I mean, the baseball games were incredible. It's hard to beat the drama that they had, so that definitely helped. But anytime you get an international sport, like Dan was saying, even with the World Cup, I hate soccer, but I do watch the World Cup because, like you said, David, there's something about just chanting USA while you're watching it.
It is different. I mean, like you bring up the World Cup example, and I think that is good. I watch every U.S. World Cup matchup. Now, there's usually only 3, 4, that's about it. Like it's not that hard to build your schedule around that in the summer. One thing that was tricky about the World Baseball Classic to me is that it's such a series-based sport that it's kind of, I mean, it feels artificial. Now, I get that. That's kind of a Major League Baseball viewpoint, right? Because college baseball obviously has, some elements that are not series-based in the postseason and things like that. But that's weird to me because it's such a different way to approach a baseball game than it is. I guess it's more like the one and done wild card game that we used to have.
Well, it's like every game is a game 7.
Sure. Which from that perspective, then it is really intense and it is really fun. It's just, it is not the same way to watch baseball. And that's okay. But it is a different entity. And again, like, it's kind of like right now, like I'm into the Minnesota Wild season right now because, we're getting kind of towards playoff season. It's such a long haul experience. And that is a different fan experience than watching a 2-week event where you're rooting for one team.
Well, with that, boys, I think we should bring the discussion a little closer to home, to the team this podcast is actually based around, your Minnesota Twins. And I do have to say, I texted you both a picture. I'm not really a selfie guy. That's not really the thing I do. So I had to figure out how to switch the camera on my phone because I went to the Twins Stadium and I picked up, I always buy one new hat each year, and they gave away a season ticket holder hat this year, which was kind of cool. But I bought a hat and I had in my hands the full white TC, and I had a gray hat with the new M logo. And I specifically bought the one with the M logo just to force myself to try and like this, boys.
Well, David, don't sell yourself short. I saw that influencer circle in the background that you had up with the lighting on there to get it just perfect for your selfie. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm still a little torn on the new logo. It looks, even though when you look at them side by side, it doesn't look as much like the Miami Marlins logo as I think it does when I look at it by itself. It's just, that's what it reminds me of right away. But I will admit, the more and more I see it, the more it's growing on me. And all in all, the rebrand I thought was incredible. Those Twin Cities jerseys look awesome.
Yeah, what I wish is they had a Twin Cities hat like that. I look at the hats and I'm like, where's some of the jersey iconography? But I don't have $500 to drop on a Twin Cities jersey. My goodness.
Yeah, it's brutal.
I do have to say, while I was in the clubhouse store, so there was a woman there who really wanted to buy a Twins jersey and an authentic jersey. So this lady's going to drop $400 and she's looking through them and she goes, well, Correa, is he going to be here a while?
The time to get a Correa was about, 6 months ago or so? That was your moment?
But here's the thing. It's great. I love that there's people buying jerseys and stuff. But if you're going to drop $400 on an article of clothing to support a team that just made arguably the biggest signing in franchise history, wouldn't you at least have some notion of the player that you're looking to buy the jersey for?
You would think. But if you got it, spend it, man. You can't take it with you. So.
Anyway, okay, enough of my shopping endeavors. So we'll get into our actual topics here, but just to sort of give you a rundown what we're going to discuss. We're going to start with some roster updates now that the roster has been finalized. We're going to talk about Carlos Correa's new house. Very exciting topic. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the season schedule breakdown and, of course, what you're all here for, to hear our brilliant season predictions, which are sure to be spot on.
I mean, mine were last year. So
41 Miguel Sano home runs. Guys. Not 40. Not 42.
They had some real cheap Miguel Sano jerseys, Dan. If you're interested, I could probably run back down and pick you up one.
Maybe I should. I should have a Miguel Sano jersey, shouldn't I?
You really
hang it
should.
up somewhere in my house.
I believe it was 90% off 300. I'm not great at math, but it's not too expensive for an authentic team jersey.
Is that still higher than his batting average, or what would be the higher number?
It's close. It's close.
Oof. Well, Dan, why don't you give us some of the notes here for the finalized roster?
Sure. So Pablo Lopez is going to be the opening day starter, which I guess makes some sense. I kind of thought maybe it would be Sonny Gray. Wasn't it Sonny Gray last year? I was kind of surprised he didn't get grandfathered in.
It was Joe Ryan last year because Sonny Gray was he wasn't all the way up to speed because of all the winter, all of that stuff.
Right, because he didn't think baseball was going to happen or something.
He did not. I don't blame him. I didn't think it was going to happen either. No, I actually lost a bet because I thought for sure it'd be Sonny Gray this year because he was looking good in spring training and everything. But honestly, I'm pretty happy that it's Pablo Lopez because I think it takes a lot for a guy to kind of earn that spot, especially because you want a guy that's kind of accepted by his teammates, and to come in and replace Luis Arraez with that trade and pitch so well in spring training that he earned the opening day starter. To me, that's good news. I know I'm reading a lot into it, but I'm happy with that.
I also like the note here, David, that Lopez is the second Venezuelan pitcher to start opening day for the Twins, which I know you guys can see the notes, but the other one, Johan Santana.
Yeah, and Lopez actually has referenced Santana a couple of times about how he watched him specifically because of that country connection. The other piece about Pablo Lopez, watching him pitch for Venezuela was funny because he was playing alongside Luis Arraez. And Dan Hayes wrote an article about this where Lopez is quoted saying, it's really hard to play with a guy who you got traded for to see what kind of person he is. And he said, I understand why now the fans are so sad that Arraez is left.
Yeah, Lopez seems incredibly likable from the interviews that he's had so far. I'm really excited for this guy. The more and more I look at this trade, the happier I am about it, especially just seeing the depth that we have I should say.
So the other thing to note here is that looking at the finalized roster, I'll give you the whole breakdown here in a moment, but I can tell you right now, the starting rotation is 5 guys, which means the odd man out is Bailey Ober will start the season at AAA. And this was a big discussion. Bailey Ober was untouchable in the spring. So my question to you guys, would you have preferred they keep Ober on the roster and run with a 6-man rotation to start the season.
If Baldelli were to manage differently, then yeah. But he doesn't. Like, if you're going to tell me that we have a 6-man rotation and you're going to try to have guys go 7 innings, then that makes a lot more sense. But if they're only pitching 4 to 5, you're putting so much stress on that bullpen still. With having one fewer pitcher in that bullpen and that many innings, like, I wouldn't like it. So I'm happy with the 5-man rotation.
Totally agree. Well, and Sonny Gray, again, alluded to this in some interviews earlier this week about how, last year, basically, like, it was a little bit of the guys not going far enough and also a little bit of the manager. And you look at Bundy and Archer, I mean, that's 2/5 of your rotation that was basically like waving the white flag, mid-4th inning, like, this is about all I can give you. So I am curious, like, is Rocco going to do things differently with his starters when he feels like, he's got guys who are a little bit more built up? Now we'll see. I mean, Maeda and Malley coming back from some injuries, obviously some pretty serious ones in the case of Maeda. So we'll see, but I totally agree with your logic, Hogs.
Don't you think he almost has to leave the starters in longer this year? I mean, because I think we can all agree that our starting rotation is the strength of this team on the pitching side of things. I mean, the back end of the bullpen is phenomenal, but there's a lot of question marks in the middle there, and you're relying on guys like Thielbar to still have a really great year. I just think we need a lot out of our starters this year, and I'm not saying that they can't produce that. I mean, I'm definitely more excited about it than I was going into last year, but I think we need a lot out of them, and I hope Rocco gives them that chance.
Well, and I think he will, because, yes, between Maeda and Malley, there are some questions as far as how deep they're going to go as they're coming back from injury. However, the other 3 starters all seem like guys who are going to be pretty vocal if they're taking out of a game earlier than they would like to be.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see guys get that third chance through the lineup and actually be able to see what they can do. And here's the thing, Ober's going to be waiting right there at AAA. They're going to need him, obviously, at some point, maybe even in April, right? Rocco, I think, or somebody was alluding in an article, I think it was Rocco, to the fact that, hey, there might even be a spot in April where they want a 6th guy. And the way the teams, manipulate rosters now anyway, he'll be up here. He's going to make a lot of starts for this team.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how early he's called upon, and I want to see what his starts at AAA look like. Like, is he really just absolutely dominating for the Saints, or is he kind of come back down to earth a little bit after a stellar spring?
I love his attitude throughout all of this, too, because in his latest interview, he's just like, I've been counted out my whole life. I don't take it personally. I just have to go out there and prove them wrong, and I'm going to do it. And he doesn't have a bad attitude about it, and I think I love that, having that heat on those starters, knowing that you have a guy down in AAA who is coming for you and is throwing lights out. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad problem to have.
No. So real quick, let's go through the lineup for position players in the bench slots as well as the relievers. This is your team, folks. Your opening day roster. We've got Buxton, Correa, Gallo, Miranda, Kepler, Farmer, Gordon, Taylor, Vasquez. That's who I consider going to be your starting 9. And then on the bench, we have Jeffers, Solano, Larnach, and Castro, who is the surprise. Willie Castro, a non-roster invitee, making the roster. Then the relievers, we have Lopez, Thielbar, Jax, Duran, Alcala, Moran, Pagan, the fan favorite, and then the sort of surprise addition of Cole Sands, who is going to play the role of long reliever.
I just don't trust the long reliever usage, though. I mean, we saw that last year. I don't know that Rocco knows how to use a guy like that. I feel like a lot of the times he trot out Emilio Pagan in the 4th or 5th, when it's like, this is a Cole Sands moment. Why is he not out there?
When we know that there is no such thing as an Emilio Pagan moment.
Not a good one, anyway.
Well, did you know that he actually had 9 saves last year? I mean, I can't even picture. He must have got a bunch of those weird, like, 5-out saves that were, I don't know. The baseball has those weird rules where there's 37 guys on base and you're only up by 12. That it counts as a save or whatever it is.
I think he also had like 8 blown saves, too. And that was, I mean, the Twins, the way that they used their closers, obviously, last year after trading Taylor Rogers. But he actually led the team with 9 saves. It was a ridiculous year at the back end of the bullpen. It's got to be better this year.
If he leads the team this year in saves, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like
that's a bad thing. That's got to be. There is no way that that's a good thing, because that means that Lopez isn't getting saves and Duran isn't getting saves, and somehow that has fallen to Emilio Pagan. I would rather have Dobnik come in and try and save the game than Pagan at this point.
Nick Gordon, right? He's still on the roster. He could maybe be the guy.
Yeah, well, but no, those rules are
remember,
weird.
There's
now,
a whole
too.
bunch of new rules. Yeah, Gordon is not going to be allowed to pitch unless, again, one of those weird rules. I don't know when Gordon can pitch, but it's not at a time that you would want him to be pitching for a save, I don't think.
Well, like Shohei's got his own rule. Like, can't they have a Nick Gordon pitching rule too?
They'll call it the turtle. That'll be the rule.
Is he's down in...
He's a free agent. Yeah, he's not...
how is he not on the team? If nothing for the marketing, come on. Anyway, with that, so yeah, Willie Castro is sort of the surprise here. And one of the big things in his favor is that he can play all over the field. And so he's sort of, it's interesting because you kind of have Nick Gordon and Willie Castro, both guys who can play almost anywhere on the entire diamond. And so I think because of that, he might not see, well, no, I'm sure he won't see as much time as Nick Gordon sees, but I think he'll find his way into this lineup quite often.
Well, and I think he was fourth in Rookie of the Year voting a few years ago. Like, he's still a young guy with some potential. Obviously, he flashed it. He was great during spring training. So it's not a bad move to have another guy who can play, a lot of those infield spots, because as we're going to talk about here, like, I don't know who's going to play anywhere this season. Maybe Max Kepler and right. I feel like that's the only thing I look at and say, yeah, that's about what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's tough. There's been so many kind of weird injuries at the beginning of this year, and you don't know who's going to fill in where. It makes the Twins front office look a bit genius for all the depth that they added.
Yeah, so the depth being important here, we should note that both Alex Kirilloff and Jorge Polanco, or Polo as he's lovingly referred to.
What a silly truncation. Polo does not appear in his name. It's Pola. Can we just call him Pola?
I like that. That's got a nice little flair to it.
What the heck?
I would never actually say that, but it's just Dan last year. If you're new to the show, folks, this was a big sticking point for Dan. Anytime somebody said polo in an interview, so I just had to make sure to
velo.
Get that
it was velo is the term that really bothers me. Velo.
I'm pretty sure polo made an appearance.
It might have, but I'm going to be listening for these truncations here.
Velo is awful. I don't understand that one at all. Like, what's the point? What are you saving yourself? Just say velocity. It even sounds better. It's fun to say too.
Francisco.
That's a nice name.
Frano. Is that what we're going to call people? Let's go through the bucko.
I'm going to
what
are
we doing?
How many different words I can truncate this year by adding an O into it. But it has to be a word where an O isn't present in the
it's
Coro.
It's like the hockey thing where all of their nicknames are Heartsy or like whatever. They just add a Z at the end of it, and you're like, oh, you guys are super clever.
Oh man. And then Cole Sands, I don't know. You knew they were going to bring a long guy, or it seemed likely that they would bring a long guy. He's just as good as any at this point, I would say. But so then the other big news here, injury front, kind of. Byron Buxton, it's been said now, he will officially start the season as the DH. And we're not really told what the plan is as far as timeline to have him take reps in center field. But there was an interesting quote, because Buxton has not done a ton of work in the outfield as far as gameplay in center field. But Buxton's quoted as saying, that's the one part of my game where I'm like, you know what? I can roll out of bed and catch a fly ball.
Can't we all?
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
Is he wrong though? Like, I believe him wholeheartedly. Like, yeah, I have no problem with him going out there cold. He'd be fine.
It is concerning though that I get that it's a general approach that they want to be very careful with Byron Buxton right away. But like, to me, him only sliding head first now and not feet first seems like a much more important development. Like, I don't know. For the Twins to be really good, don't they need him to be playing in the outfield just to maximize their roster?
Not anymore. Now that they signed Michael A. Taylor. That was a move they should have made like 3 seasons ago.
Sure.
And just said, here's the deal. We have a guy who is a bit fragile. Now, don't at me. Like, I get it. Like, there have been some bad luck injuries for Buxton. But when a guy has been off the field as often as he's been off the field, there's something to that. It's not a magic injury fairy who comes around and just strikes people randomly. Like, there is something to this. But had the Twins made a move like this, we might have seen Buxton in a lot more games the last couple of seasons if the front office would have had this in mind earlier.
I don't think you're wrong with what you're saying about him, but I don't think he's fragile. I think it's more because of how he plays the game. Like, he's such an intense competitor that he just doesn't know how to play it any differently. And I go back and forth on this one so often because he is dynamic in center field. Like, he can change a baseball game playing defense just with your lovely momentum, David, that we all know you all love. My dad would always say if a guy makes a brilliant play in the outfield, he's always coming to bat the next inning and he's going to get a hit. Like, it's just stuff like that he does. But at the same time, if we get 140 games of him in the lineup, whether that's DH, center field, or whatever, I would take that. And then you almost got to feel like he wins MVP if that happens. Like, if he's actually playing that often, I want him in the field so bad, but I want him playing 140 plus games more.
I did say the word fragile. That's not exactly what I meant. Like, but I hope you get the gist here. I'm not saying he's made it glass by any stretch of the.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just like, I think it's because of how hard he plays and just the nature of it. He's not a breakable person. He's running into walls. I mean, you're going to get hurt when you do that.
Accurate. So listener Eric actually brought a question to Hoges, what we thought the split would be in center field, whether Michael A. Taylor would get more starts in center field or Buxton by the time the season ends.
I think it's probably Taylor. I mean, he's going to get a head start here in April, and if they're really going to do maybe an every other day kind of deal later on, I think probably Taylor 90-72, something like that.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I think it's probably going to be Taylor too. I want to say that it's going to be Buxton and that he's going to play that many games out in center field, but I think with how they're going to handle this year, I think it's definitely going to be Taylor. I just hope that he is productive offensively. Like he can get close to where Buxton is in the field, so there's not that much of a drop off, but he's still going to need to hit to be able to be that guy if you think he is playing 90 some games out in center field.
But he doesn't really need to do that much. I mean, he's always going to be 8 or 9 in the lineup. They're not really expecting him to be a big punch of offense like Buxton.
I think the other thing too is I wonder if we'll see Buxton more in pinch hitting, pinch running situations late in games. You know, that he's going to sit, but then he might play the 7th, 8th, 9th in center or something like that. Like, I can see them manipulating that more because they were so beholden to the idea last year that, when Buxton rests, like he's got to rest. Like he can't leave the clubhouse. He's got to be sitting, whatever it is. So I wonder if that will open it up a little bit more for the spots that we thought last year, man, why isn't Buxton pinch hitting or pinch running here?
But I would hope this season is far less times that Buxton is even available off the bench because he's in the lineup, even if it's just his DH.
Yeah, that's a solid point because they did so much load management, to steal an NBA term there, for him even before he went out. And from all accounts, like he was taking 8 hours a day in order to rehab, in order to even do what he was able to do. Man, we say it every year, but if this guy can just stay healthy, I mean, the production that you get, whether it's DH or center field, it changes this whole team's outlook.
Definitely. So speaking of ways that this team's outlook is going to change, going into this season, I do have to say that because of the moves that the front office has made and the lineup that they've given to Rocco, I had this question originally, who will play first base the most this season? But in actuality, that question is much more complex. Really, the question is, who will play first base, second base, third base, and left field the most this season?
Yeah, where to even start? Do you want to answer that as like basically which guy's going to play the most, who plays all those positions? Or do you think who's going to be the most valuable utility guy, I guess, on this?
That's the question. I do think it's going to be Nick Gordon. I truly think that Nick Gordon is going to factor into this team far more than I would have ever thought that he would the last couple of seasons.
How important do you think he is to this team, David? If you had to put a number, a rank on him, is he the 4th or 5th most important guy, or where would you put him?
He's got to be the most important guy after 4 or 5 guys, definitely.
But you just proclaimed him to be the most important utility player, and I think that's going to be super valuable this year because of the way that you just talked about how they're going to need somebody to play a lot of different positions. They're going to be multiple people to play a lot of different positions.
Yeah, well, so let's start with the easier one. I would say I think third base will obviously be Miranda because they're letting him play there even if he's not at 100%. But I think who plays third base the second most has got to be Farmer, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you're assuming the guys that are healthy now and if Correa is healthy for the whole year, yeah, I hope it's Farmer that plays the most after that.
So it does seem like first base and left field are going to be sort of the ones that are maybe interchangeable because you have Gallo obviously, and then Solano who's more of an infielder, and then Miranda who can move from third. It's just first base. You're not going to see the same guy at first base for an entire week of baseball games, I wouldn't think.
You didn't even mention Alex Kirilloff, and I wonder, is he even going to factor on this team this year?
I don't know, man. He had his arm chopped off, I thought.
All of it.
This one scares me so much because they keep saying how this surgery was kind of like the end of the road. Like they can't do anything after that. And to see him have this setback, you wonder, I mean, this is it. Like this is that guy.
To me, Kirilloff is in this, he's just in a separate category right now. It's like, man, it would be great if he could play. But I just think the Twins have basically made moves on their roster to say, we're not counting on you. And I don't see any reason why he would come back this year and it would be any different than last year. If he's still feeling pain, wasn't that the whole point? Is that the pain would go away?
Yeah, I mean, that's why they did all of it. And if he's still swinging and feeling that, I don't know.
It's interesting because the second base situation is a little bit different with Polanco because it seems as though Polanco is going to come back relatively soon. But there are more guys knocking on the door at second base than there are at first base. So Kirilloff's path to first base, I think they would love to just keep Gallo in left and have Gordon play wherever he needs to get plugged in for that day, as opposed to having to do this constant carousel. And so the path for Kirilloff is a little bit easier because there's not as many people pressing for that first base role. Second base will be the other question, and I do think we'll see a lot of different guys take reps at second, assuming that Polanco isn't going to be able to be there for the majority of the season. At this point, it seems like he's coming back pretty soon, but I would think that Nick Gordon, if he's playing well and second base is sort of his home, that all of a sudden Polanco might have a little bit of a battle on his hands.
I don't know. I think Polanco has it when he's healthy. I think they find other places for Gordon to play.
Yeah, you look at Polanco's numbers from last year and they're not up to par with what he's normally been at, but I think with him more than anyone else, he always wants to be out there, so I think it's easy to see his numbers get impacted by injuries more than most guys because he's just going to go out there regardless of what's happening to him. So I think you need a healthy Polanco, and if he is healthy, it's his spot.
I don't know that and here's the thing, I'm a big Jorge fan. Like I've always been a big Polanco fan.
Big Polo fan.
Big Polo fan myself. But the problem is, because the DH spot is filled, and because you'd always prefer Taylor in center field, if Trevor Larnach and Joey Gallo are having good seasons and Nick Gordon is batting as well as Nick Gordon can, as we've seen previously, that's a hard guy to keep out of the lineup.
You can always put Gordon in center on a once a week or something like that. I'm just saying it's possible.
I just think that it's hard pressed for me to say that we're going to see Nick Gordon in center field all that often, barring any injuries.
Sure.
These problems are problems that we'd all love to have, right? There's a lot of ifs. Like if Gallo's having a great year, if Larnach's having a great year. Like the thing I always come back to is when we didn't know where Luis Ariz was going to play when we signed Donaldson and we had like Polanco was playing second and everything, and then Donaldson comes up lame on his first hit in the Brewer game, and it's like, well, Ariz is going to play third. Like some of these problems just work themselves out very, very quickly.
So a quick side note before we jump into the season schedule: our brand new shortstop Carlos Correa, brand new in a new contract sort of way, has recently, I was informed by our sponsors, the Grand Group with Edina Realty, if you're looking to buy or sell a new home. Anyway, but they have informed me that Carlos Correa has purchased a new home in Orono, $7.5 million, 5-bed, 7-bath, which seems like just a lot of bathrooms for one house. But it's almost 10,000 square feet. So obviously Correa is planning to make a nice little home here.
I guess that's where I can stay when I come visit. I mean, I'm sure the address is there. Can't I just knock? He's a very friendly guy.
It is a beautiful looking house. You sent us the link, and it is gorgeous. I'm jealous. I wish I made that much money.
I mean, I'd say it's pretty similar to my house. If by my house you take the garage that's attached to his new house, that's a pretty close comparison to where I currently live.
I don't know. Did you see that garage though? Even that face. I mean, they were nice.
He's got a lovely view of the lake. He's got a patio space out there. Think of all the parties that you could be invited to, guys.
Hogs, you've been to my house, and you just basically said that my house isn't as nice as Carlos Correa's garage.
I mean,
the thing is, I may be more sad because it's so true.
Well, the next segment here, we wanted to talk about the Twins' schedule, which I think last we really talked about was when it was released, and we kind of had dream road trips. But now it's here, and this is the schedule they're facing, and every team is on it, which I think is so cool.
Honestly, I am so excited about that. That's one of the coolest changes that the MLB has made in a long time, just to be able to see every team. And this is the first season in a while that I've gone through specifically. Every season there's a couple of series you're like, okay, I really want to make sure to go to that one. This season in particular, I'm circling dates like crazy. It's like, oh man, I want to see the Mets. I want to see the Padres. It's just super exciting to know you're going to be able to see those teams this year.
And for what Dan's talking about too, planning all these dream trips where you're all these stadiums that maybe you just go watch a random game. Now you can try to watch the Twins there. I think that's sweet.
I don't know how much is going to happen this year, but I am looking forward to it. And the other thing I like about this schedule is the way that it's balanced. Just seems smoother. There's not any of those weird holdover Monday games on a Sunday series, and I really like the neatness of that structure too.
Yeah, it's basically the series is going to end on a Wednesday or a Thursday and a Sunday. There's none of these weird, you're going to play the Guardians 9 games in a row.
Oh, yeah, I won't miss that.
What I want to talk about here, though, boys, is that last season I had said if the Twins get out of April and they're a 500 baseball team, they're going to be an interesting team to watch. And I would say that was proved to be pretty accurate, I'd say. And but this season, it's much more difficult to determine. So I was going through the schedule and I went through and I added the ranks for each of the teams that we face. And here's what I'll say about this season. the first half of the season, so leading up to the All-Star break, is much, much more difficult than the second half. So think about this. In the first half, the Twins see the Astros twice, the Yankees twice, and the Blue Jays twice. We won't see those teams at all in the second half of the season. We also see the Braves once, the Dodgers once, and the Padres. That's all in the first half of the season.
That's potentially, those are all maybe playoff teams too.
I'm going to the Braves series. I'm pretty excited about it.
All those teams you named are, I think they were playoff teams last year, or they're obviously predicted to be this year. It's always so tricky though, because you just don't know until they play the baseball games. The Baltimore Orioles, for goodness sake. I mean, they're ranked 18th. Who knows what they're going to do? They had a record season last year over the last couple decades. It's hard to tell, but I do think you have identified teams that we're pretty sure are going to be good.
And I kind of like that, getting battle tested right away with having, I'd rather have the tougher half of the schedule first and then it be easier in the second half. You just see who you are. Theoretically, we should be all healthy in the first half and more so than we are in the second half too. And I think these guys are ready to go. I think that's competition. And I think the biggest thing this year that we'll have to look at is how the Twins fare against that kind of competition. Because last year they played the Dodgers. You just know it's going to be a sweep.
One thing that I think is funny here. So the last time they play the Royals is at the end of July. They don't play the Royals again in August or September. The last time they play the Tigers is August 16th. Like, it's weird to me to not have those two teams, which we potentially think are not going to be great, to kind of play and maybe even beat up on at the end of the year.
So to put this in perspective, the average preseason ranking of the teams that we'll face in the first half is 14. So, which isn't crazy high. However, in the second half of the season, the average rank is 17. So there's definitely a drop in prospective goodness that we're going to see in the second half. But so the second half, what makes it interesting is the only team that we see more than once that I think is likely to be a solid team this year are the Mariners. We see them twice. But then we see the Cardinals once, the Phillies once, and the Mets. And then besides those people, everybody else on the schedule is like 14th or high. So the back half of the schedule should be considerably easier. So one of the reasons I say this is because I think if you get to the All-Star break and you're at least playing 500 baseball, that shouldn't be discouraging, knowing that the back half of the schedule is easier.
I look too at the balance as far as, home series, away series. I don't see a ton of stretches where they're really away for a lot. I mean, their longest road trip is just 3 series in a row: Detroit, Atlanta, Baltimore, which would be a great road trip. But I mean, aside from that, there's not a lot of really bad stretches. Maybe a stretch in July, August, where they go at the Royals, and then at the Cardinals, and then they're home for the Diamondbacks, and at Tigers, at the Phillies. But like you said, they only see the Cardinals and the Phillies those times. I like the way that that's balanced out. It's got to be also because of the way that the schedule is laid out. It's a little easier to schedule those trips.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. They have a lot more games that are available to them instead of just trying to cram in 19 games against the Royals, Tigers, and White Sox.
Are you guys going to miss that? Is there any part of you that will miss seeing those central teams as much as we have?
No, I don't think it decreases the rivalry at all. I mean, it's still what, 13 times that you play them, or 14 times? You play them a ton. Like, it's plenty. Like, I'm happy to see these other teams. I'm happy to see these other stars that we don't get to see come to Target Field. I don't think we'll miss that at all. And you still have plenty of divisional.
So I want to note here to start the season, because I think this is going to be something that's going to cause a little bit of consternation for the home fans here, being that we see the Royals, then we see the Marlins, and then we see the Astros at home for the opener. And I think you best only have at most 2 losses in those first 6 games, because I'm just not super confident going against the Astros at home that we are really going to be. I don't know what the expectation should be. If they win that Astros series, I will be just floating on air.
Well, and you figure after that you've burned Lopez for 2 starts probably. He'll start against the Royals and then against the Marlins. So you need Joe Ryan and Sonny Gray to show their quality.
And the Astros aren't. I know they're the number 1 ranked team here on this list, but they aren't what they used to. I mean, you look at all of their guys, their alums that are out in the rest of Major League Baseball. They've lost a lot of good guys, and they've definitely reloaded. Don't get me wrong by any means, but Altuve's out. Like, I think that's a good time to meet this team.
Totally. I don't want to play that team with Altuve. It's just one less thing. So in that way, I guess it helps them. They would see the Astros again at the end of May. You got to think Altuve's back by then. But yeah, who knows? Year to year, I mean, these teams can change, and they've pushed their chips in for the last couple seasons. I don't know. You can't sustain that forever in baseball.
There's a couple of teams that have had a pretty long track record of being successful, Dan Thompson.
Yeah, but the Astros cheated for a couple of those years. So come on.
In our text thread,
there
folks,
is that.
You should know how many times Dan takes shots at the Astros, because it's significant. It is not insignificant.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Altuve didn't know that pitch was coming. hit him in the hand. Yeah, take that, Altuve. I tell you. Yeah, the asterisks. That's what I like to call them. I tell you.
I love how we trash them. I put up air quotes there because I thought
that was good.
I love how we trash them all the time. And arguably the face of that controversy is one of our favorite players now.
Well, we said last year, like with the Twins, that Twins fans would just kind of forgive Carlos Correa. We have forgiven Carlos Correa,
yes.
Have we not?
Absolutely we have.
Okay, on this note, I just need to say a couple of things, okay? I am really tired of articles and tweets and people talking about how it's great for players who were in high-pressure teams to come to Minnesota where they can just they're really going to succeed with not so much pressure on them. What is it about our team and our fan base that we expect players who played on superior teams typically coming to our teams that we no longer have any sort of expectation for them to produce? Like, people are like, oh, well, Joey Gallo, the Twins are a great spot for him because the Twins don't care whether he's successful or not. Like, I'm so tired. We as a fan base should be more critical of our players, and we can do it in a very passive-aggressive Minnesota way if we need to. That's fine. But my goodness, I hate the idea that we as a club have this idea that players can come here with no expectation and no critical thought and questions asked of them by the media here.
What if they buy a $7.5 million home, though, David, and invest in the local community in that way? Aren't we just happy with that?
I was informed by the Grand Group, real estate, if you're looking to buy or sell a new home in the Twin Cities area, I was informed property taxes is like $50,000 a year on that place.
No.
See, there you go. Orono is very happy to have Carlos Correa as one of its residents.
So is there
those roads
district?
better be plowed. Those roads better be plowed just as soon as that snow hits the ground.
Wouldn't it be better if Carlos Correa was the one out there, like plowing his neighbor's driveway, like clearing the plow pile?
I think it'd actually be better if it was Alex Rodriguez out there shoveling by himself.
If I see one more picture that he tweets out of him with a shovel, what I don't understand, at least make it look like you're trying. The first time he did it, unironically, you can see the plow markers. You can see a plow has already gone by. Alex is out there trying to shovel his lawn.
Yes,
he's got no idea.
The best thing about this is one of my best friends from college is a huge New York Yankee fan, and so I sent him the video and I said, you can have him back, and he wrote back, I don't see what's funny about this. So it just goes to show you that no one knows how to shovel snow outside of the Midwest.
But here's the thing, the second time that A-Rod posts, he tries to be funny about it, like, oh, am I doing this right? The guy walks out on his deck because everybody who shovels know that the best way to shovel is to walk out into deep snow first and then plow a path back to your door. Like, what? No, you're not doing it right, Alex. This is worse than your first attempt.
Where have we gone? This is not on the note sheet, guys. This is not on here.
We were talking about Carlos Correa's new house. No, the season schedule. I don't even know, Tim. I don't even know. I'm all riled up.
We have season predictions to make here. Can we jump to those?
I guess we will. Then it's the time. Everybody, most people have probably fast forwarded on the podcast. They're like, can these guys stop talking and just tell me all the wrong things that they think is going to happen for this Twins team this season?
Speak for yourself. My predictions last year were unbelievable. Like, if I had taken those to Vegas, I'd be living in Orono in a $7.5 million house right now.
They were okay. Okay, I'll give you that. I just double checked. I went back and I checked. They were unfortunately, I am gonna have to give you that one.
Like,
Hogs. Those are pretty good predictions, actually. So we're gonna go through each of our different categories for the predictions. And this is just a quick note for those of you who are new to the show. If you haven't listened before, typically we produce an episode after each Twin series, and we have 7 or 8 segments that we go through where we talk about who Beast versus Bench, who played really well, who played really poorly. Rocco's Rewind, where we discuss Rocco's decision making. We talk about Mauer's musings, questions we have about the team. So we have a few different segments. So our typical format is we do a really brief series recap, and then we go right into our segments. Our episodes run about 30 minutes long. So if you're new, if this is your first time listening, thanks so much for checking us out.
All right, so with that here, we're gonna run through some positional player predictions, and then we'll run through some pitching predictions, and then a crazy prediction that we've added at the end here, which I'm excited for.
So we'll start here with the player stats. We're going to do most home runs because that's the most fun, right? That's what we want to see. Which Twin is going to break break Judge's record is really the question on the table here.
I am going to go with what I think is the realistic option here. You guys. So I'm going to say Joey Gallo with 34. I don't see a guy hitting 40 on this team this year. I think Gallo, because of he's going to feel less pressure in Minnesota, he's going to loosen up. But I think the shift loosening and going away, essentially, I think is going to make him, he's just going to be a confident hitter batting from the left side. I think 34 is a good number for him.
I like that pick a lot. I thought between my pick that I ended up picking and Gallo is what I was torn between. I really think he's going to have a good year, but at the same time, and David's going to make fun of me for this, I thought Sanchez was going to have a great year for us last year, which, hey, if I remember correctly, David picked Sanchez to lead the Twins in home runs last year and was quite a ways off. So I think
to be fair, part of that was just because I really like chanting Gary. So
it's a great chant. Hey, he hits that one opening day. You never know what happens after that.
I bet he would have hit 90 if he hit that one out on opening day.
Are you a little worried, though, that Gallo is going to have a horrible year and be cut before the end of the year just because of Dan's previous predictions for home runs here?
Well, from what I heard, he actually hurt his ankle celebrating with the Little League club.
Yeah.
So Gallo won't be in the starting lineup.
Kufus, I see your number here. Go ahead.
Okay, this is bold, and I know it's bold. I know that it's beautiful, but so I have Byron Buxton because the Twins are going to understand how to keep him in the lineup this season. And I don't care. I would love to see him in center field, but if you have him bat as often as he can, if that means that he never plays in center field all season, as long as he gets these at bat. Last season, he was on pace to hit 49 home runs. This season, he's getting even more at bats. Byron Buxton will hit 48 home runs.
That would be so cool.
Who are you? Like who are you? Did you two like body swap or something like that? Like what is happening? Like I love it. I absolutely love it. I went with Buxton too. I didn't get quite as aggressive as I can't get over it. If he hits 48, I will party in the streets. But I picked Buxton as well. I picked him with 35. I think the injury bug's still gonna get him because he's gonna run into a wall in center field. I think he's gonna play more than 100 games this year. I think he's gonna be in the 110 to 120. So I think 35 is a good number.
You know, I think we haven't talked about Royce Lewis. Royce Lewis played, one game in center field and got injured? So I can't just be about Buxton. I think Royce, well, we'll see. We'll see how Royce factors into this team, too, for what it's worth.
I mean, obviously, Hoges' prediction is probably more realistic.
Sure.
But honestly, in my mind, my thought was if Buxton is going to lead the team in home runs, he's going to lead the team in home runs.
He led the team in home runs last year, and he only hit 28. So,
well, let's go to batting average here. We actually, you guys are in agreement. So how about you guys go first here?
Yeah, we're actually very close here. So both Hoges and I have Correa, and we're only 2 points apart here. So I had Correa at 295 will lead the team. Hoges had Correa at 297.
I just think he's going to have a good year this year. I think he's going to have a little bit of a chip on his ankle to kind of prove like everyone wrong about all the injury concerns. Like I think he's out there to prove something, and I think he's got the talent to do it.
How long have you been sitting on that one, Hoges?
It just came to me. I was right as I was speaking. I was rather proud of it. I'm not going to lie.
No, Hoges has got 3 Post-it notes on his computer that says that pun. I'm sure of it.
So David, I know that you're the conductor of this train now, but I went with Nick Gordon batting 294. And for the record, for our listeners here, we did these predictions blind. So we don't know until we reveal them here as we go. We don't know. But I do think that Gordon's going to be great. I think Gordon and Correa were both written about by Dan Hayes about their swing and how the work with the Twins hitting coach Popkins has really made a difference. And I think Nick Gordon understands. His dad was a Major League Baseball player. He understands what it takes. I think if he is feeling healthy, which I think he is, and if he feels comfortable with this roster, which he does, he's not going anywhere on this team, I think he's going to have a great year.
Well, and like I said, the big reason what sort of kicked my mindset on Nick Gordon a little bit into a different gear was last year, I was down on Gordon to start the season, and then Dan kept bringing him up like, hey man, he's playing better than you're giving him credit for. And then as the season progressed, he continued to improve, and then the tipping point, what led me to put on the hat, what led me to start shoveling coal into that steam engine for the Nick Gordon train that I'm conducting here, was Carlos Correa's press conference saying the core that this team has put together between Buxton, Miranda, and yes, our guy Nick Gordon. I'm on board. Choo choo.
I think it can't be understated how much him being healthy actually matters too, because he was struggling with those intestinal issues for so long that was causing him to not be able to put on weight. He looks so much better, came into spring training in the best shape of his life, and like just seeing that strength that he has, I think it'll carry over into this year. I think that's a good pick. I'm on the Nick Gordon train too.
Be careful about mentioning the best shape of his life, folks, because we
true,
know with
too.
Miguel Sano that didn't matter.
So next we have on-base percentage, and I would love to tell you that there was a large swath of thoughts here, but unfortunately, or fortunately, we all went with Carlos Correa, and both Hoges and Dan had him at 370. I had him at 350 for on-base percentage, and I don't know who will even challenge that. My only thought is maybe Joey Gallo, if he takes a ton of walks, would be my only other thought.
Yeah, I was going over my predictions with a buddy while I was doing this, and I was just asking for his advice, and he's like, man, this is so much harder without a ride. And it's true. Like batting average and on-base percentage, it has to be Correa. I mean, there's no one else that walks enough on the Twins. I tried looking at the roster to mix it up a little bit because I didn't want to go with Correa for everything, but it's got to be him.
Well, my goodness, speaking of, there's a little bit of a mix-up on OPS, so that's on-base plus slugging, but we all pretty much agree on the number here. So, David, you have Byron Buxton at 850. Hoges, you have Miranda at 850, and I have Buxton at 855.
Right in the same wheelhouse. Yeah, I don't think anybody's doing like a Nelson Cruz where you're above one, right? Or I forget, was it Ohtani or who was above one last season? There were a couple of guys above
Wasn't
one.
it Judge?
Judge, yeah, and I forget one other guy I thought was above one.
Buxton was above one 2 years ago, too, in I think 2019 was.
When he played 12 games, I think.
Played about 65 games.
Well, Hoges, you've got Miranda. Like, you think Miranda's going to have that good of a season?
To be totally truthful here, I wanted to pick Miranda for something. Like, I wanted to pick, I knew we don't have RBI up here, so I wanted to pick him for something, so I picked him for OPS. I think if I really had to choose, I think it's got to be Correa, but I wanted to mix it up a little bit, hedge my bets a little bit. I think Miranda's going to have a great year, so I'd be pumped if he hits this number of 850.
Hoges, you had a chance there to make a great Hamilton reference. If you had to choose, and you just skipped right over it. I mean, I know it went over David's head regardless.
It's preseason, Dan. I'm not in midseason form yet. I'm not.
I don't know.
Yet.
That chip on his ankle was a pretty good one. That was midseason work right there.
Hoges is now writing on a post-it, Linwell.
Let's go with the pitching stats. So now ERA for a starter, and this is interesting. We're all different.
This is a hard one. I think that we picked the three most likely. So I'll start here probably because I think mine is most likely the most common prediction out in the ether. I would say I have Sonny Gray with an ERA of 3.25 on the season.
I went with Joe Ryan at 3.31, which I struggled with trying to find a guy who I thought was really going to be fantastic. Like, I look at these guys and I think they have a lot of number 2 and 3 starters, which is not a bad thing. I have trouble seeing Sonny Gray replicating what he did last year. I'm not sold yet on Pablo Lopez, but we'll see. I mean, you guys are talking me into it. But I thought Joe Ryan was the safe bet in many ways to have another solid season with an ERA of 3.31.
This category was the most difficult for me because, like Dan said, we have so many 2 and 3 level starters, and it's tough to choose between them. I ended up going with Pablo Lopez. I was encouraged by the way that Twins coaches saw him in spring training, him getting the opening day start, and I went real optimistic. I went with him having 3 on the dot for his ERA, and I think that's doable. But I mean, I think there's going to be a Twins starter that gets close to that 3 mark, no matter what.
I think if that happens, then we're talking about a dang good baseball team. If they can have an ace like that, to me, a sub 3 ERA is pretty much you're an ace by the definitions now.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go forward here to ERA for reliever, and we'll let Hoges and I guess Hoges, we're a little bit too in mind here,
I think,
which it's a little bit sad because I think that means that it sort of hurts your chances of being correct with these predictions.
It's true. I'm not liking them right now. I'm not liking seeing what you put up there.
No. So I went with Duran with a 1.54 ERA, which would be a slightly better than last year, but not by much. I just think anytime you have a guy who most of his pitches that he throws are over 100 miles an hour, as long as he keeps control, that guy is just really, really hard to hit.
And he's throwing breaking balls that are 98 miles per hour. Because I kind of thought, well, maybe I won't go with Duran because he'll have like the sophomore slump or whatever. But how do you learn how to hit that? It doesn't matter how much that's on film. You can't hit that.
As we saw with Ohtani throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle to Mike Trout, and Mike Trout couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah, but that was boring though, right? No one cared about that. No one was watching.
Didn't matter. I wish it wouldn't have happened.
That was a great moment. You couldn't have scripted a better ending to the World Baseball Classic than 2 teammates facing off. I get that, Hoges. I get that.
I got a
not just 2 teammates. That wasn't Joe Ryan throwing to Polanco.
Well, let me bring us back to the relievers. So I picked somebody else. I picked Jorge Alcala. Not as good of an ERA, 2.14. I guess that's as much as I'm worried about, like you guys mentioned, a sophomore slump from Duran. I don't necessarily trust Lopez just based on his performance in the second half last season. But I also think Alcala is going to be really good this year. So I think they're going to have a lot of guys, hopefully, in that 2+ ERA range, kind of between 2 and 3. I just think Alcala is primed to have a great season. Maybe not as great as as Duran had last year, but I think to have a great year.
Yeah, I think that back end of the bullpen is strong, and I could definitely see Alcala hitting that number. It's just the back end, or the front end of the bullpen, I guess I should say, that I'm worried about.
Totally.
Definitely. And I do think, though, Lopez we're sort of writing off. And I think it's because we were so disappointed after we acquired him from the Orioles at the deadline. I think his performance was just so subpar that we're pretty quick to be like, I don't know that he's going to factor into this category. But clearly, he's going to get a lot of opportunities this season, and he could just as well have as just as good as ERA as Duran had last year.
Well, now we've got, these are maybe my three favorites ultimately: the season MVP, the season LVP, and then the crazy prediction. MVP, David, I don't understand your pick. So if you could explain your pick based on how you set this up with most home runs, I don't understand how you didn't pick Byron Buxton.
Well, pretty easily, because I don't think Buxton's going to see center field all that often this season.
But you mentioned that he hit 48 home runs. How is a Byron Buxton hit 48 home runs not the MVP on this team?
If he's never in the field, just because he hits 48 home runs, I don't think that makes him the most valuable player on the team.
Hoges, like,
what?
Help me out here. I don't understand.
I'm speechless. If he hits 48 home runs, he might be the AL MVP.
No. I don't know what else to say, but no.
All right. So
if Byron Buxton never sees center field, and let's say he bats .215, but he hits 48 home runs, you think that he's MVP?
Okay, but a couple of things. He's not Adam Dunn, right? So he's not going to do that.
He hit like .220 last season.
Okay, but we're going to get to mine.
He couldn't run.
Right.
He still hit 29 home runs. Am I the only one listening when people are talking? What are you talking about? You're like, oh, he's not going to have a low batting average. What did he do last year? He led the team in home runs, and he had a terrible batting average.
Okay, then I will go with mine.
You can't say that that's not a possibility here.
All right, so let me talk then. So I picked Byron Buxton as my MVP. Like, I don't with 31 home runs, a .261 average, and 101 RBI. So, and the reason that I did it this way is I think the shift ban is actually going to help Byron Buxton quite a bit too. In fact, there was the article by Phil Miller today. I think it was today or earlier this week in the Star Tribune, mentioned how he's really kind of the only righty on this team that saw a lot of shifting. And if that's not going to happen, he hits a lot of balls to that side of the infield, right? He pulls a lot of baseballs. I think that's going to help his average significantly if you consider too that he's going to beat out a lot more infield hits this year if he's pulling balls to the shortstop. So I think Byron Buxton's going to have a great year. But even like if he hit 48 home runs and hit a .260 average, like Hogue said, he's the league MVP.
Yeah, and I would take that. I get what you're saying, David, to a certain extent about how, what he did bat .215 last year or whatever it was, but he was hurt. If he's healthy where he has the chance to hit 48 home runs, his batting average is going to be higher than that. If you can see the look David is giving me right now, it's like, you're the dumbest person I've ever talked to in my life.
I hate the way that this was dismissed, that because the guy hits a lot of home runs, that automatically makes him the MVP. And I don't think that's not what the most valuable player is.
But he also has an OPS by your prediction of 850. Like, it's not like you're saying he's going to do nothing.
Well, you realize home runs also equate into OPS, Dan.
I do.
Okay, just making sure we need to do the stats breakdown.
Can you just give your breakdown, David? So what do you think he's going to do?
I've been trying, but I've been too busy defending myself from the hostile attacks coming from the opposition, apparently.
If he hits 48 home runs and he's not the team MVP, I will be so excited. Like, I will be so happy. And we're going to win the World Series then. So,
boys, I'm tired. I don't even know that I can go on. Tuesday night at 11 p.m. You're all yelling at me about my predictions. They're my predictions, okay? Lay off already.
The irony is we haven't even heard your prediction yet.
You didn't give me a chance.
Well, go ahead. Jump in.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Carlos Correa will be the team MVP. With 24 home runs, he will have a batting average of .295. I think that he will play in the field a lot. I think that he will be one of the better defensive shortstops in the MLB, and his clubhouse leadership skills cannot be denied.
Championship culture.
Of course, Dan. I think Correa will be the team MVP this year. It's really hard to bet against him, even if Byron Buxton hits 48 home runs.
I'm going to save that clip. Hoges, can you explain? Because I think yours is sensible given what you've got.
I went with Correa
so,
as
hang
well.
on. Whoa, hold on a second. Hoges has Buxton hitting 35 home runs.
13
I'm having him hit
less. That's a significant amount. That's like 35% is it not?
Okay, I'm not a math guy, but I'm just saying I don't think this is as crazy. Hoges has virtually the same, other than I have Buxton hitting one more home run every 12 games, and all of a sudden that makes me insane for saying that he's not not the MVP.
You guys are missing all the hand waving that is happening with all of this that's going on right now. I picked Correa as well. I basically copied all of the stats that I had picked him for in all of my other predictions. I have him at 297 for batting average, 370 for OBP, and then 479 for slugging. The only reason I didn't pick 480 like David did is because I picked Miranda to win with 850 for his OPS, and that would have been tied if I had picked Correa at 480. I think Correa is going to have a great year.
All right. Well, all right, well, let's go to season least valuable player here. Let's start with David. David, put you on the spot here. Well, who's yours?
Okay, if Hoges doesn't get chastised for the numbers that he's put down, I'm going to lose my mind more than it's already gone. So I'm going to try and calm myself here. Least valuable player, I'm very sad about because this is another player that I've been a big fan of, mostly because he's got some German heritage in him, as I do myself. Max Kepler, I think people are making way too big a deal about the shift ban really helping him out. I don't really see it happening. I think he's only going to hit 215. He's going to have 8 home runs, and his playing time is just going to get less and less as the season continues.
He's jacked, though. Did you see him in spring training? He looks like a monster out there. So, I mean,
well, I actually tweeted, I said Kepler's offseason mindset was they can't catch it if it burns a hole in their glove.
Right? That's incredible.
I do think the shift ban is going to help Kepler, and here's actually why. I think the Twins would have traded him if they didn't think so. This front office is so driven by sabermetrics, is what we used to call them, that I think they think, gosh, Kepler's gonna outperform projections. So I think you're wrong on this, and I know that you hope that you're wrong on this.
Very much so, yeah.
I just think you are.
I think the Twins actually value his defense in right field a lot more than we maybe think about, because it's a tricky right field to play with that limestone wall and everything. So he's so valuable out there. Probably should have won a few Gold Gloves with how well he's played out there. And I don't know. Like, if you told me Kepler was going to hit 30 home runs, or you told me he was going to hit 4 home runs, I would believe both of them equally. Like, he has that ability. He's shown that ability. I could go either way on this one.
I think that, well, a couple things. I think if he actually does hit 30 home runs, I think that actually oddly helps his Gold Glove chances, just because it brings extra attention to him. I do think he's deserving of it. But obviously, this is another make or break year for Kepler. If not now, then when?
Yeah, this is it for him.
Just to point out here, so Gleeman did do a breakdown, and what the shift ban would amount to for Kepler last season is 12 more singles. So we're not talking about night and day statistics here with this shift ban. I just don't see it. I don't. I wish I did, but I don't.
I've seen so many articles about that, about how they're predicting like what the shift ban actually gives a guy versus take him away. And not to sound like an old man, but they don't know. Like, how do they know? They don't know where the guy's going to be standing. So I get that they're trying to guess that, but I just don't put that much into it. That's why I'm in a wait and see with him. Like, it could go either way.
Well, these are predictions, Hoges. Of course, we'd rather wait and see. My goodness.
All right, so Hoges and I have agreed on our LVP. I'm going to say that
okay,
I'm the more...
This is just insane for a couple of reasons. So you go ahead with your predictions, but I just want to say that these stats won't even be possible because there's no way he's going to be on the team long enough if this actually happens.
Okay.
Are you kidding me? Did you watch last year? We lost the division because he blew 37 games to the Guardians. I mean, that's the only reason we didn't make it.
But they won't play the Guardians 37 times this year, Hoges, so it won't matter. It'll be okay.
Give your stats on the player who I'm sure nobody knows who it is at this point.
All right, so I'm going to say Emilio Pagan. I think his ERA, because I agree with Hoges, I think he's on the roster. 4.92 ERA, 8 blown saves, keeping in mind that a blown save doesn't need to be at the end of the game. Like, that can be at any point if you are in a situation where you could have held the lead and you didn't. So I think Pagan survives, like the city of Houston in Independence Day. Like when a nuclear bomb is used on it. I think Emilio Pagan somehow endures.
How did the city of Houston get...
That's just what they did in the movie. Like, I don't know. Stuck with me.
Well, I also went with Emilio Pagan. I went with a slightly higher ERA of 13.65 because I think he makes the team and I think he's terrible. Like, I think he only pitches in maybe like 8 games right at the beginning of the year, but it's so bad and we lose every single one of those 8 games that I had to go with him for least valuable player.
Just so you know, Dan, with that ERA, he would have been like a pretty good middle bullpen guy for this team last season.
Fair point. Fair point.
I'm just saying, I would be far more gracious to both of your predictions here if I didn't just get raked over the coals for my season MVP pick.
All right. Well, speaking of crazy predictions, which I think David has already made, I suppose. So, do you want to make your own here, David? Your quote, real crazy prediction?
Yes, and my real crazy prediction, as I mentioned, if you've been listening, I am on the Nick Gordon train, the Nick Gordon hype train, and I say Nick Gordon will make more starts than anyone on this roster in the field.
I don't know that that's that controversial, other than, I mean, the guy we're talking about with Max Kepler, but you've already poo-pooed Max Kepler, so I guess in some sense that makes a lot of sense. I could see Jorge Polanco, perhaps, if he's really indeed able to get healthy, challenging that.
Yeah, and I honestly, I think it is a crazy prediction based on the fact that you're picking a guy that doesn't actually have a position on the team. However, with the injuries that this team has and with how versatile he is, I could definitely see this happening, because he's just going to be all over the place, which shows you how valuable he is to the team. Like, probably the third or fourth most valuable person on this entire team.
You moved him up a spot there, Hoges, from where I would have him.
This is a callback, folks, to last season when Dan said, and I quote, Nick Gordon is the most important guy on this team after like 4 or 5 other guys.
That's true. Which is an important role, right? To be the 5th or 6th best player on the team. That's not nothing.
I think that's when you call them the 10th man award.
I should. There's a Formula One Drive to Survive style documentary that follows the PGA Tour, and they follow one guy who, one of my favorite quotes in any documentary,
be the 72nd best player on the tour.
That's like my favorite quote ever. This guy goes, "Somebody's got to be like the 65th best golfer in the world. Might as well be me."
I love that. That guy was so lovable. Joel Damon, I think his name was. He's
I love that you knew what I was talking about before I even
It's
said
the best
it.
clip of that whole show.
The crazy part, guys, is that Joel Damon is from this part of the country. He's from Eastern Washington. So go figure.
Go.
I should be watching this show. Well, I'm going to give my crazy prediction here. So, and maybe this isn't that crazy, but this is a guy we haven't talked a ton about. I think Edward Julian is this year's Jose Miranda. And I'll tell you why. So last year, Jose Miranda came up, and he was the guy who was climbing the ranks of the minors quickly. And he came up, he appeared, he wasn't great at the beginning, but then he came back and he stuck. There wasn't a clear position for him at the beginning of the year with Gio Urshela playing third, but he just kind of found a way. And I just think the way that Julian has been hitting, I think he's going to make, I'm not prepared to say, quite as many plate appearances as Miranda. He's the guy who pops and makes a difference on this team later in the season.
I think it's possible. However, I do think the discussion we've been having about second base and Nick Gordon and Jorge Polanco make the path for him much more difficult if guys stay healthy.
But like anybody can play first base, right? Like, I don't know. I just think life finds a way. He's going to find a way to be on this team.
Well, we're talking about quotes that are great. It's like the best scene in Moneyball when they're trying to get Hattenberg to come to play first base. And Billy Bean's like, it's not that hard. And then the guy who's with Billy Bean's like, it's incredibly hard.
See, I think that's a perfectly reasonable prediction, too. I feel like you both misunderstood this assignment. I'm agreeing with both of your crazy predictions, so I'm going to go with mine. A Twins starter finishes in the top 3 in the AL Cy Young voting.
Which one?
Yeah, that's my
I'm not
question.
picking that. I think with how many 2s that they have on this team, they're bound just by sheer averages for one of them to turn into an ace, are they not?
That's not how averages work,
That's exactly
right?
how they work.
David, you work with spreadsheets all day.
I do. The computer does all of my crunching for me, though, Dan. I don't really do this whole on-the-spot math thing. But yeah, what Hoges just said, I can verify is not accurate.
But the ramifications of that, Hoges, is pretty significant.
Yeah, I think Kenta Maeda in 2020 finished second in a runaway vote to Shane Bieber, who won the Cy Young that year. But I think they have the talent. I mean, Tyler Maley's shown that he can be very successful. I think Joe Ryan maybe doesn't have as high as ceiling as the other guys do, but if he's performing at his perfect level, he can get those numbers. At Sonny Gray, there's Pablo Lopez, there's guys on this team who can reach that level, and I'm going to go on the optimistic way. I think one of them's going to have a really bad year, and I think one of them's going to have a great year.
Well, now, gentlemen, we're on to perhaps the most important prediction, which is how we think that the whole team will actually do here. And you know what? Again, we have a pretty much agreement here on these overall, I would think.
Yeah, it's far closer than I thought it was going to be between us. And I do want to say, as far as the media predictions are concerned, I think the Twins are heavily weighted as underdogs entering the season. Most outlets have the Twins as like maybe contenders, and they have them between the 10 to 15 mark as far as where they rank in the MLB. And I think that they're a top 10 team this season. But again, I also host a podcast about the Twins. So what can you say?
It is fascinating to me because none of us were on board with what they were going to look like last year, and they ended up competing for the entire year and just fell apart in September September because they had injuries, and they have drastically, and I mean drastically, improved their roster from last year to this year. I don't know how you can't be optimistic about this, and I feel like it's being lost with the national sports media right now on what this team fully did. It's not just Correa. I mean, they strengthened that starting rotation. They strengthened their depth. They tried to make it so that if those injuries come, that they're going to be able to avoid that. And I think you'll see that in our projections this year compared to what we predicted last year.
Well, so last year, I'll just give you the projections in terms of just win totals. So last year I projected 80 wins. David had 88. Hoges, you had 81. I guess I was technically closest, though it didn't feel like I ought to be. The Twins only won 78 games last year, but they were doing dang well for a long time there. But this year we're about 10, 12 higher. I have them winning 94 games, which I feel like it's higher than anybody nationally seems to be predicting.
I went with 92. I went a little bit lower just because I still think it's a tougher division than people give it credit for. I think the Guardians are a solid baseball team, and I think the White Sox are going to do a lot better than they did last year. So I think it will be competitive. But again, that's an 11-game swing over what I had last year. I'm excited about this team.
I'm the most optimistic, which I'm kind of surprised about, to be honest. I thought Hoges would be coming in and being like, well, they're, definitely over 100, right? But I have them at 97 wins. And full disclosure, I started with them at 96 wins, but I didn't like that then it was 666, so I changed it to 97 wins.
But then as far as postseason finish, David, you and I each have them losing in the ALCS, but winning a series would be a significant improvement here. Winning a playoff game would be something.
Just so the people stop talking about the record.
Yeah, we don't need 0-18.
Year.
We don't need it anymore.
No, please stop. Please stop telling us how it's the worst record in professional sports history. We know. Stop talking about it. Everybody knows. Just stop.
So, David, you said you thought that I would be picking them to have more wins. Well, I went overboard on my postseason finish here. I'm predicting them to win the World Series. You heard it here first. I think they're going to win the World Series this year. Because so at 92 and 70, I got them getting into the wild card. And I'm like, I think they're finally going to end the streak. They're going to win in the wild card. And then I was just thinking about it more. And I'm like, with those starters, you have 5 number 2 starters, and you're trotting those guys out, you're not necessarily having to have any guys go on 3 days rest because you're so deep. Why can't this team make a run? Why not us? Why not us this year? Let's do it.
I think it's because of the 8 in a row losses. I think, yeah.
That's why not us.
But you know what? Here's the thing. Maybe this could be like a 1991, right? Where the Wild make a run, Twins make a run. Like, there's something that's beautiful about the fact that it's been a long 32 years, guys, since a championship in this city.
It's brutal. And full disclosure, if the Wild win the Stanley Cup and the Timberwolves win the NBA Finals and the Twins win the World Series, I win $1 million. So that'd be pretty sweet too.
How much should you put on that?
$12. Because I needed to get it to $1 million on the dot. So I bet $12.71.
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously that would be fantastic. What would you do with that $1 million?
I don't know.
He'd take us to Manny's to start.
I would see if that's good enough for a down payment for a house in Orono to live next to Correa.
You could talk to the Grand Group about that.
I
Hope.
could.
I think you'd have
Are you looking to buy a home in the Twin Cities area?
All right, well, we have one last thing we need to do that I think we forgot to do last year. We actually have to make the Puckett's Picks selection for this upcoming series. David, you want to tell people kind of how we score this and what Puckett's Picks is?
Yeah, so Puckett's Picks is a segment that we do each episode where before each series, we pick the player that we think is going to perform the best in the upcoming series. And so they're graded based on a scoring rubric here. They get 1 point per base, 1 point per RBI, 1 point per stolen base, and then negative points for strikeouts, grounding into double plays, or errors in the field. And so they'll score the point totals, and then whoever has the most points gets the win for that series. And I do need to point out, I won 2 years ago, I won last year, and what do you know if I win this year here, boys? That's dynasty is what we're talking about.
Okay, but again, didn't I have more total points than you? Was that part of the calculation?
This is a whole thing. Points don't matter, Dan. It's wins that matter. I don't know. The points are meaningless, Dan.
All right. Anyway, this all means, so we always have a guest pick or pick for the listeners here. And when Hoges is on the show, Hoges is the one who fills in. So Hoges, you get to pick first because the listeners always pick first.
I'm going to go a little bit different here for this pick. I'm going to go with Joey Gallo because Buxton hasn't played in a lot of preseason games, so I don't want to pick him. And Correa had such a slow start last year, so I'm going with Joey Gallo for my first pick.
And so Dan, as the loser from last year, you'll get to pick first between us.
I think I was second place last year. I think I was ahead of...
But you didn't win, so that makes you...
All right. Let's see here.
You
know what?
First, you're last.
So last season there was, if Byron Buxton was available, you take him. I'm going to take Byron Buxton. He's available. I'm going to take.
Boys, this is not a strong showing for you two to start the season here. Carlos Correa is on the board. My rule stands just as it did last year. As Carlos Correa is available, I will take Carlos Correa. I have third pick, and I'm getting the guy who the Twins are paying $200 million to, because Hoges thought Joey Gallo, a guy coming off a season where he bat under 100, and Dan going with Byron Buxton. I'm just saying, I'm not even trying, and I'm still going to come away with the victory this year.
But hold on, I just picked the guy who's going to hit 48 home runs, according to David. But he's not the MVP.
He's not the MVP. No.
Oh my God.
He's not.
You know what wins you Puckett's picks? An OPS of 850. So I'm going to go ahead with Byron Buxton. I'm happy with my pick. My gosh.
I don't know if you really want to listen to Dan for the guy who's going to tell you what wins Puckett's picks.
What do we, Hoges, how do we put up with this? Is remarkable.
It's brutal.
The arrogance of this.
It needs to end. It ends this year. It ends.
I lose so many things all the time. To finally win something, I have to take it where I can get it, boys.
Well, this has been fun. And we should, a production note here. And I know David would love to make this note in his sassiness, but I'm going to make it myself. So I'm actually going to be out of the country here conveniently for the first 3 series of the season. And Hoges is actually going to be out of state, but he has volunteered to fill in for me here, to take his recording equipment with him where I'm not willing to take mine. And so it's going to be Hoges and David here for the first 3 series.
Which will be great, because then I can gloat about my Gallo win after the opening series.
Good. Please. And if Buxton wins, gloat for me, please.
We'll do. We're in this together this year.
We are. That's true. We need to combine and bring down Kufas. I think that should be
that's what
our
it's
goal.
going to take for you to win, I think. I'm going to win like 1 series the entire season at this rate.
Well, last thought for me before I leave the country is I'm just excited for baseball. I love this time of year. Everybody's got a chance. Even for, you just never know. We see so many teams struggle through early season slumps and still come out ahead. I'm hoping the Twins don't have that, but I'm just excited for what we think is going to be a pretty great season for the Twins.
It's amazing how much the season turned on the Correa signing. Like, so much of what we thought this year was going to be hinged on that, and then we got him, and let's go get it. I'm ready. Let's play some ball.
So last production note here, folks, and then we'll have Dan send us out. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you so much for checking us out. Again, we produce episodes after each Twin series during the season. If you're a longtime listener, if you've been with us from the get-go, thank you so much for the support. Make sure you find us on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe. One other thing that we're doing this season, we did start a Patreon campaign. If you do want to look us up on Patreon, it's a good way to support the show. We're never going to charge for our content, but if you'd like to throw us a couple of dollars in support, we'd appreciate it. No obligation. The best thing you can do for this show is to tell a friend to like and subscribe.
Well, with that, guys, I'm going to send us out. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win. You can find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Thanks for listening. And as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.